Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Delighted to have everybody on the call with us today and really looking forward to what should be a really interesting discussion with some fascinating insights from all the speakers on the panel. So the title of today's session is Big Game Ransomware, the evolution of ransomware in the enterprise and how to mitigate the risk. We're delighted to have our award-winning cybersecurity advisory partner, Templar Executives, along with us today, and really looking forward to introducing you to the speakers. You just move the slides forward for me, Tim. Thank you so much. So with us today, we have Andrew Fitzmaurice, the CEO of Templar Executives, who's going to bring a boardroom perspective to the audience and really give you some insight into what really is keeping CEOs and their teams awake at night around the threat of ransomware. We have Robert Golladay, Director of Strategic Accounts at Illusive, who runs our Europe and Asia Pacific business. He'll just introduce you to the real cost to the enterprise and how Illusive is working with customers to address these risks. And then exciting real-world practical application of Illusive technology from Timothy Nursel, Sales Engineering Lead for Northern Europe at Illusive. And he's going to show us how to mitigate the risk, taking an active defense approach. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Andrew. Thanks, Andrew.
Matt, thank you very much indeed, and welcome everybody, and thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to talk to you today. So, big game ransomware, a huge topic at the moment for all boards around the world, but interesting enough, they don't really understand all the ramifications of this. So I think today would be incredibly useful for getting some messaging across of just how serious an issue this is. A little bit about Templar, just to start off, and not all of you know who we are. Well, Templar came out of government originally, and majority of myself and my colleagues all are ex-government service, many military, many intelligence services, and commercial, top-level commercial people as well. And we've come together really to offer this portfolio of offerings around business consultancy. We've got a world-class cyber academy. We're very much supported by the British government, and all our courses are certified by our National Cybersecurity Centre, and all our instructors are also vetted to deliver the latest and most up-to-date information as part of the courses. And these are obviously very popular. We do everything from the board level training, which we're really here to emphasise today, but also through to the front line and to cover e-learning. We have an approach which we call holistic. So we do look at the people, the processes, the culture, and the ICT solutions as well. And they all need to be integrated and moving together in harmony. The sectors that we cover are as follows. So we work across all the CNI. We do a lot of work with government, obviously, but we work with 3 of the G8 banks around the world. We're very well known for our work in healthcare, which doesn't automatically seem to be relevant, but actually the use of the cybersecurity lens to protect digital health, but also to optimize the journey of patients' healthcare records, absolutely hugely important. And we've just completed a major program in the UK and going to be starting another one. We did a lot of work in oil, energy and nuclear, maritime, education, transport and manufacturing. The principles of cybersecurity can obviously be to all sectors, and that's what Templar ultimately specializes in, but always starting with the board. So moving on to discuss today's topic. This video is a capture of live feed, which demonstrates how often and how much ransomware is being reported and seen around the world. It's absolutely huge, and you can see the damaging costs are around about 20 billion. Interesting enough, victims of ransomware, there's been quite a lot of studies around that, and it's estimated actually that 34 to 40-year-olds will actually pay for the decryptor. Anybody younger actually will pay the ransom. And interesting enough, 46% of UK ransom attacks will actually be paid, but only 18% will actually get back their full unencrypted, unleaked information. So very, very small percentage. So that really tells us that no matter what, we need to attack and we need to defend ourselves against this ransomware issue. Next slide, please, Tim. ransomware gangs are absolutely prolific. I can remember back 6 years or so ago, ransomware first came into the public domain, and this was through an attack against a hairdresser in Glasgow. That's what made the headlines. The ransom was £700, believe it or not, in cash, of course, being Glasgow. And the idea was that they'd locked up his address list for his clients. He actually paid it, but of course the decryptor didn't work. And boy, have we moved on in those 6 years since then. This is an international business, as we saw, worth 20 billion. But some will say that over the next few years, the amount being extorted will just grow and grow and grow. Here we can see quite a lot of the prolific ransomware gangs which are around, but that APTs, advanced persistent threats from nation states, are now playing in this pool as well. And if we take North Korea, for instance, the Lazarus Group has estimated to have extorted around about £2.6 billion over the last 3 or 4 years through their exploits alone. So it's hugely successful. Conti on there, you can see, has absolutely probably extorted the most, and that's around about 75 million as a particular group. So hugely vibrant business area, which again, boards aren't automatically aware of and perhaps don't think about day to day in terms of the risks that they're managing. Next slide, please. So ransomware, for those of you of a certain age, you'll remember that alcohol used to be advertised on TV. And there was one known as Martini, which you can still buy, obviously. And ransomware is sort of like the martini of malware beverages. It's anytime, any place, anywhere. And really, we can see here from these headlines, it's attacking operational technology, it's attacking IT. It's in every sector, and it's growing disproportionately, really, compared to other attacks. Because why? Because it's really good, big business, and people can make a lot of money out of this. Next slide, please. So this really is a dynamic threat. And if we think back to what I was saying about the poor old hairdresser getting attacked in a very, very simple lockup through a very simple attack using a phishing attack and locking up his database. We're now into different types of strategies. The double extortion strategy, lock the information and leak the information, so you end up paying twice, one to unlock it and secondly to prevent it from being leaked. We see formation of partnerships. Extortionware is also growing. Big game hunting is sort of the title of this presentation today. And the reason why that's so important is that the bigger the attack, the more money that can be ransomed. So the greater the range of the attack. So we're now starting to see complete systems being hunted down as that big game. And of course, therefore, the corresponding ransomware demands are getting larger and larger. And emergence of new ransomware families all the time. It's a continually changing target. Every day, and this is why I love cybersecurity, by the way, because every day is a learning day. Every day we'll pick up, there's a brand new type of ransomware or malware out there on the market or out in the wild. And we've got to do something about it. And we've got to be able to protect our businesses against it. Ransomware as a service package. This came out on the darknet about 3 years ago now in a meaningful way. I could get Matt's details, for instance, put them in. If Matt's a really rich man, I could send it all off, nominate my bank account. And within 3 months, if they successfully ransomwared anything out of him, I would get 40%. You can nominate anybody you like through the dark web. Serious organized crime is, as it suggests, very serious and very well organized. And they're gaining in capability all the time. They are, in fact, not too far off having state-level capability, and some states are known for utilizing serious organized crime gangs to actually help deliver ransomware, but also the quid pro quo is that in the time of need for the state, they would then help the state themselves with other forms of cyber attacks. Next slide, please. So ransomware and the dark web. Most of us sort of understand the World Wide Web and the dark web and the deep web. But what we're seeing here is this sort of 2 pay points almost. A successful ransomware attack, so you pay for the cost of the decryption key. And then obviously the blackmail to prevent release of data comes in because they have exfiltrated data, so you ended up paying twice. And we have seen a rise of professional companies now who will actually bargain and barter on your behalf to try and get your data back, costing you the least. And there was one just recently recorded by the BBC, a university in the States, which had been attacked, and eventually they traded out the price around about $1.4 million in Bitcoin, what was going to be the price to get that data back. So as I said, very, very vibrant. And now follows is just to show you how professional they are. This is a video from the darknet advertising fraudulent credit cards.
Hi there, and welcome to CVVplaza.com. We are the #1 CVV shop on the internet since 2010. Are you tired searching for legit CVV websites? Or did you find a legit CVV website but with poor quality cards with low balance? Search no more. CVV Plaza is the CVV shop for you. CVV Plaza has hand-picked cards with high balances and high valid rates, and our starting prices are as low as $1 a card. Is the card invalid? No problem. We offer a free CVV checker with no additional cost. So what are you waiting for? Register now at cvvplaza.com.
Just hugely professionally produced, and of course hugely illegal. And now, of course, I wouldn't be suggesting that all of you go onto the darknet to try and find the adverts. It's not a cool place to be. But interesting enough, Templar has something called Blade, which is a state-level capability, and we support law enforcement and others going to look for people's lost data, and we also use it for M&A. But the interesting thing is, we see in the press, we celebrate the takedown of Silk Road 2 or some other group from the darknet, but actually we estimate there's about 700,000 vendors at the moment on the darknet. It's a massively vibrant marketplace. And you know what, you get key performance indicators on the gun posted through to you. Was the packaging okay? Did the gun work okay? I've never seen a negative review, by the way, folks. Nobody's actually turned around and said, actually, it wasn't that good. So it's, as I said, it's such a vibrant marketplace. And if I take you back to the sort of the view of the boards, they're slightly displaced from this sort of knowledge. They tend to be, dare I say, people my age and above, who may not have an interest in technology. And indeed, when they were young, the only thing in the house was a phone, which they and their sister used to fight over to see who was going to call somebody. The impact on the world they could have was how far they could cycle in one day. And now, of course, we live in a totally different world. And they employ people who literally do live half their life in cyberspace. So again, it's about getting that understanding from board level about how they can protect themselves and how they can protect their business. Next slide, please. And of course, there's huge implications for a cyber attack. There are many, many great examples out there. And in the UK, of course, TalkTalk is one of the ones which is always raised about this. And this does actually give us a unique problem, because companies are very reluctant to say and put their hands up and say, look, we've had a cyber attack, a successful cyber attack, because it is so share price sensitive. And in the city over the last sort of 18 months, 2 years, out of the 6 biggest attacks, actually, all have been blamed on IT. All have been blamed on IT, but actually 5 out of those 6 were insider threat. Why are they blamed on IT? Because in the general public, in our own lives, IT doesn't always perform as you wish it to do. It's nothing personal, it's just ones and noughts. And sometimes you think it is very personal when your laptop's not working, or in Matt's case, you can't use Google. From that perspective, it does seem very personal, but of course it's not. But if it is understood that you can't manage your people, you can't vet your people, you haven't trained your people, there are no real good processes in place, then who wants to invest in you as a company? Who indeed wants to invest in you in the company? So instant management is absolutely key, and it's something, again, which boards are starting to become aware of. But do they have the tools? Do they have all the processes? Do they really understand? Well, they understand, they don't want to make it public. So how much are they actually going to be able to put up with successful attacks before they've lost so much of their IPR and they've lost so much money that they cease to function? Next slide, please. So this is a leadership journey for the board, understanding the cyber threats, establishing the baseline identity about what you care about both, and what are those critical information assets that you wish to protect. And nobody's got a 24-karat solution here. You have to decide and take a risk-based approach on how much of those much needed controls go around your critical information assets versus assets which perhaps you don't worry about so much, like advertising and actually getting your brand out there. They need to define, they need to build a strategy and plan. But it's the implementation piece. So if you think about holistic cybersecurity, I mean, people, the processes, and the ICT, from my perspective as a board member, I would want to have a bit of actionable IT help, which actually started to mitigate the risks around my processes, around my people. If you think the persistence of learning in cyberspace is approximately 6 weeks. So if I was to sit somebody down, sort out their LinkedIn profile without reinforcement, they'll go back to doing everything wrong within 6 weeks. And that's the same for big business. So if I could find a bit of actionable software that is going to protect me and help mitigate the risks while I work on those, I can't ignore them, but actually from a perspective of a defense that will help me really safeguard my data and my business, then I need something that Illusive can offer. So over to Robert.
Well, thank you, Andrew. It's always a pleasure to share the stage with an executive with Andrew's experience and passion for helping Templar's clients. So thank you. And Andrew, that was great scene setting for the boardroom view of ransomware. And at 20 billion in damages annually this year, and what became $1 billion industry in revenue last year, ransomware has actually become its own industry in its own right, and it's not going away. So we're gonna take this a bit deeper down the rabbit hole and introduce this concept known as active defense. It's what allows our clients to move from a reactive to a proactive position as it relates to detecting and preventing this type of enterprise type ransomware. See, Illusive was founded 6 years ago by an organization called Team 8. And Team 8 was founded by ex-Israeli Defense Force officers, and more specifically, the commander of the 8200 unit and his cyber attack team. These men and women were the best of the best. They were elite attackers. And when they founded Illusive, they built technology that could stop themselves. The team ultimately attracted security-minded investors to help us realize our vision of changing the game on the attackers, developing a solution that creates a hostile environment for attackers to operate in. Perfect for advanced ransomware prevention and detection. Now, many organizations perform red team exercises to validate the effectiveness of our solution, and we've never lost an engagement, even against some of the most sophisticated security organizations out there. So let me take you through one example here. And we've literally stopped hundreds of attacks to date, including nation state, malicious insider, and of course, ransomware attacks. This slide speaks to one of those instances where we were able to help a European customer avoid significant reputational and financial damage. We were the only security control to detect this attack, and frankly, it was somewhat lucky. The day we were implemented into production, we immediately started getting alerts. And the attack had started 7 days prior. It moved very quickly. This ransomware attack, if you follow the press, looked a lot like what happened to Garmin in the US. Of course, in their case, many online services were interrupted, including website functions, customer support, customer-facing applications, and company communications. These cyber criminals targeted Garmin with a ransomware attack that encrypted the company's internal systems and shut down critical services like Garmin Connect and Fly Garmin and InReach. And the company, kind of comically, though sadly, first detected the attack when employees began to share photos of encrypted workstations. And once attackers encrypted the files, they demanded a ransom payment of $10 million to restore access to the data. As you look across many of these recent attacks, you know, we see breadcrumbs of everything from Cyrillic letters to portions of Donald Trump speeches, and that may be comical, but it's literally not, because we're being made fun of in terms of our defenses. So here's the thing: an active defense is designed to flat out prevent this type of scenario, and it's what we Illusive were built for. So without further delay, I want to introduce Tim Nursel, our lead field engineer for Europe, who's going to put the reality around this claim. Tim?
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Bob. I think I overcame the first technical hurdle. I presume everybody can hear me. Brilliant. So I'm going to talk about mitigating the risk with active defense. But before we can actually mitigate the risk, we need to understand what the risk of ransomware is and try and put it into the right bucket for the right level of protections. So to do that, let's start off with the evolution of ransomware. Let's go back right to the beginning and see where did it start, and then where have we actually come to here. First piece of ransomware. This is slightly contrived, but when do people think the first piece of ransomware actually was? And I've run this through a number of people and sort of gone, oh, was it 2000? I can't imagine that it was anything before that. Ransomware on Windows XP, anyone remember that kind of stuff? It seems much newer than that. But actually, 1989 was the first piece of ransomware, or the first one that people say was ransomware. Which actually gives me the delight to say ransomware is actually slightly older than I am, and we've still not managed to combat this threat. So there was a number of different pieces of ransomware. And if we go for something that sounds more like ransomware, 2008, we saw these fake antiviruses, and these things look really compelling. And a large number of people did fall for these. We have to remember that the word crypto isn't in ransomware. Encrypting machines is something that's fairly new in terms of the ransomware game. It wasn't that many years ago that we still had websites that didn't have SSL certificates because the level of encryption and the amount of hardware required to do that on-the-fly decryption was actually too high. Only recently have we actually managed to get phones that are so fast that we can decrypt everything incredibly quickly and show that end-to-end without it slowing it down. So this is just fake antivirus. And then we start to move on a little bit further. Let's actually lock the machines up. You'll notice 2010, still no Bitcoin in there. Bitcoin, again, something that's actually pushed the ransomware industry further and further and further. Whether is it a good thing, is it a bad thing? It depends on which side of the fence that you sit on. And how many millions you've got stored in Bitcoin wallets that you can't access because you forgot your password in 2013. 2013 takes us into this crypto level of ransomware. We've all seen these kind of screens. We've seen the crypto lockers. We've seen the Bitcoins. We've seen your system's encrypted with AES, whatever it might be that it was using at that time. And actually, this is the single machine got hit with ransomware. We're asking for this ransom in that type. But we have moved on from there. We do now see this enterprise ransomware, and exactly the examples that Bob was just giving around gets into the network, starts to move around, finds the right level of data, starts to encrypt there, does some extortion. And this is just FT code. I'm not sure if anyone's come across this. I'm hoping not, but we saw this recently in a fairly large bank as well. What this was doing, this was taking credentials from their web browsers, using those credentials to move into their administrative systems. So no longer is it just hit one machine, but we do find that people still think of ransomware as this crypto piece. Recent examples, if we think like FatFace, they probably thought it's not a problem if we get hit by ransomware, we've got backups. Backups are going to save us, because that was what we were told in 2013. Back up your data, if you get hit by ransomware, it's not a problem, you can restore it. Until the attackers start moving laterally, and this is exactly what we saw in FatFace. They got access to a machine through bad patching, it was available on the internet. They moved around until they found the backup servers and encrypted those. And FatFace is a fascinating story if you go and look at it. The amount that they paid for the ransom was exactly what their insurance would pay out. Initially, they asked for a lot more money, and they actually did do that, that bartering, that bargaining, and said, we've only got this amount of insurance, and that's what they had to pay. But we're not in this just encrypting one machine. We're very much into this enterprise level ransomware. And if we just explain that a little bit further, I don't think we can do a cybersecurity presentation in the modern day without saying the word SolarWinds. So here's the SolarWinds attack, again, but from a slightly different angle. How does this compare to what we're doing with ransomware, or what we've seen with ransomware? Let's ignore the really clever bit on the left-hand side. Let's start after that beachhead, that's stage 0. We've got access to a machine. So step 4. We saw this dropper, we saw this DLL injection, we saw that something got into the machine. We saw tools like Cobalt Strike, we saw AD Find. We saw that they moved around with dumping credentials out of LSAS. We saw DC sync attacks. It compromised domain admins, which meant that it could then propagate with WMI and RDP, got into the machines it's looking for, further and further, and then the ADFS, it gets into the golden SAML, and further and further and further there. So the bit that we're really going to care about is this 4 to 5. This probably the most advanced attack that we know about that's in public knowledge, using DLL injections, using this lateral movement, using this living off the land techniques to access what it needs to. And this was in weeks/months to achieve because of how it was looking around. But if we start to compare that against a real targeted ransomware attack that we have seen, we've identified this, how did Illusive see it moving around? Again, crafted phishing campaign. So it got in, it got that beachhead, it got that stage 0. We've got access to a machine. What did we see? We saw a DLL injected. Doesn't that sound very similar to something we've just been talking about? We saw Cobalt Strike. We saw tools, whether it's going to be DC Sync, whether it's going to be Advanced IP Scanner. We saw off-the-shelf tools being used to gain further access. We saw off-the-shelf tools for C2. We saw Bloodhound. We saw LSAS to dump memory. It compromised the domain admins. And then, sounds like I'm saying the same thing again, WMI, RDP to propagate. Got onto the jump servers, and then it actually accessed all the things that it was looking for. Now, doesn't that sound incredibly similar to something we've just been talking about? Doesn't that sound exactly the same as that, the threats that we've seen from Solarwinds? However, this wasn't a days, weeks. This was an hours, days, and actually we've seen this where it's gone through systems in just an hour from that initial compromise to domain admin. So we should probably be thinking about these threats in terms of APTs, and we should probably then start to apply APT threat protection against it. Now, if I just jump through, here's an actual Windows workstation doing all the things you would expect. This one doesn't have Illusive on it. We've got an attack tool here, and all that this really does is allows us to simulate what that piece of ransomware did. The first thing it did, it discovers, it looks for machines that are on there. That's not my real password. You can try and log into my Google as much as you like. My password's actually password 3, not password 2, so that one won't work for anybody. But we can see there's only a couple of different things we could pick. We've got these clear text passwords. We've got all of these servers. So what we saw the ransomware do is it would do some remote execution from this machine, from these users. We might try and RDP onto a number of machines. We can do all of these different things. And again, this is exactly what it's going to be able to show here. I'm not going to run this because I have run this a number of times. It does infect 6 other machines in the back end. If anyone does want to do a full ransomware briefing, we can show all of this and different families. And the only time I did run this and it went slightly wrong, I'd left my jump box open because this is completely air-gapped. One jump box. My missus wasn't very happy because the internet went down for 6 hours while I had to restore from backups. So this really does work. Just to show you what this looks like, a slightly defanged ransomware. Encrypt your files. Everyone's seen this kind of screen before. Your files are now encrypted. This is actually using a real piece of ransomware that our R&D team made a little bit friendlier. And by friendlier, I mean we've got a decrypt button, but the not encrypted file that is now encrypted, and you can't open it. Again, we do have a decrypt button, which makes it a little bit easier to use. So we can see the speed there. We can see it run through, it can rip through networks incredibly quickly. We can see that it's using RDP and WMI for propagation. So maybe we should start to apply things like MITRE ATT&CK to it. And we can see again, these things on the left, your traditional tools, your EDR, the firewalls, your network-based anomaly detection. That's great for our initial access to try and stop that execution, to try and stop that persistence, to try and stop the privilege escalation, defense evasion, and that is great. And these things are definitely needed for your checks and balances. But if anyone here wants to try and tell me that Solarwinds or that FireEye or that Microsoft or the US Department of Defense didn't have all of these things and still got hacked, I'm willing to hear that, but we know that they did. And that's why Illusive has built this active defense. And that's why we can have this extra layer of defense that in a number of occasions will pick these things up. When we find machines that haven't got EDR, we can still get in there. And going back to the Solarwinds, going back to this ransomware, discovery, lateral movement, collection, this is where the Illusive focus is really, and this is how we can defend against these things and have such high efficacy and such great success rates against red teams, against ransomware. I'm not sure if anyone's seen this before. I thought it'd be great just to flash it up. This is Malwarebytes Shield, and this is around active defense and things that you can put in to move from a defensive posture to actually an active defense, make the attackers come to you, stop that 200-day dwell time that most organizations face, turning that into minutes, hours, seconds, whatever it might be. We're putting these decoy accounts in there. We're putting this dummy data in there. And you can see that a number of these are specific to what Illusive have got. There are things in here that we don't do. There are no silver bullets in security, and we are not that at all. We work much better as a defense in depth, or defense in concert, as we like to call it, integrating to your other systems. And just to call out a couple of things that we can see within Shield before I show you them actually working. Decoy, I'm not going to read all of this out, but decoy content. We can put things within the network, we can put things within your endpoints that both APTs, both malware, both ransomware will attempt to use. Coming from a pen testing, red teaming background, I always used to say that pen testers are lazy, and what I mean by that is we'll use the easiest way in. If somebody says, here's the domain admin credentials, or you can go and you can do 15 different lateral movements and you burn some 0-day, guess what we're going to use? We're going to use the domain admin credentials that are available there. And we can start to put in decoy content that ransomware will hook onto that looks like files that should be encrypted. We can also do the same thing with credentials. As we said, hey, here's some decoy domain admins. Here's some decoy FTP servers. Here's some decoy registry, memory, network, all of these things that we see attackers use time and time again. And we've got some other great webinars and videos where we can see people like Alyssa Knight get incredibly frustrated because of these decoy credentials, which then leads us into these decoy systems. Things in the network that look like critical systems that you would want to go after, but actually they don't work. And they don't give a massive flashing error message, as we'll see in a second, that say, no, you've been caught, this was a decoy. These things look like cache credentials haven't worked. These things look like the attackers might be wrong, but their tooling is still telling them that it should work. And if we go and actually look at what this really looks like, here's another machine. Exactly the same machine as before, pretty much the same MAC address, pretty much the same IP addresses, but this one has Illusive in it. And there's no Illusive running down here. We can't see that anything's running, but if I go and discover these credentials, and we look at what we might have in here, as you can see, that number is much higher. We can see we've still got specific credentials in there, but we've now got a number of other accounts, and we've got another sets of passwords. We've got more users that we could try and use. And if we try and take some of these and just pick some of the servers, we might want to try and remote desktop into there. It's going to crash out. The demo gods are always never in your favor when it's actually on demo day, is it? Let's see if we can get that to work. There we go. So we're trying to do a remote execution against there. We may try and take some of these webs and try and do some web attacks here. And if we just try and run those attacks, give it a minute, not only does Illusive come back and break what's happening, but we also slow attackers down. And if we think of the number of seconds, milliseconds that it took to run that ransomware previously, actually, this is slowing us down significantly, and we've now alerted. We can see down here, we got unauthorized, we've got access is denied. We get the normal kind of error messages that you would get out of these tools. We may then want to go and encrypt, and let's try and encrypt. And it wouldn't be a great ransomware demo if this was going to encrypt all my files. So no points for guessing what's going to happen. Yep, I want to encrypt all my files. I've also never seen a piece of ransomware that's asked me that before. So that's how we know this is slightly defanged. We get that same message, but we see this seems to have sort of stopped, and it's not killed it, but it's running through an awful lot of extra files that we might have there. If I pull that into Illusive then, and just show you what that might look like. Let's go into here and pull out some incidents. We can see there's an ongoing incident here. We can see that the triggers were web and shares, and I can go in and look at this and say, hey, actually, someone tried to PSExec with this user. And I remember the Sarah user, might have been the user we just looked at. He's tried to access something across the network. And although it didn't work for them, we've got this great level of forensics. And oh, this looks very similar to what we were doing. Here's a desktop screenshot to show you that this actually didn't work. And this is what they were trying to do. We can see the web attacks that are happening in here and all the different share accesses. We can also see that there was a ransomware attack that happened. And let's just explain a little bit about what happened here. Again, Explorer, attack tool, CMD, ransomware. That was the process tree that happened. We saw that it tried to access 21 files, and that process has now been blocked. So not only did that piece of ransomware not manage to encrypt any files, let's go and look. It's not encrypted. Still says hi. Still very friendly. But we can go back into Illusive and see that it tried to encrypt these files. Those deceptive artifacts that we've got across the network and on the endpoints. That's what this piece of ransomware tried to pick up. And again, I've run this with Conti. I've run this with a number of pieces of ransomware that have affected large organizations that we're working with. And we have stopped it, because it's going after this deceptive data, this incredibly rich data. But actually, with an active defense posture, we've managed to stop this. And if we just go in for the last couple of minutes, you're having to listen to me and look at what targeted attacks are doing. What are their techniques, and what's the Illusive approach to stop it? And I'm not going to go through all of these again, but just a couple of ones that we see, both ransomware, APTs, and if you look at your red team reports, your pen test reports, we can see domain admin credentials, and we actually have a way to be able to discover and eliminate these. We're seeing endpoint security being turned off or evaded, so you only have to look as far as, again, Solarwinds, Microsoft. These are evaded, these are disabled. If you've got 200 days, you can bypass these things. We can see LSS memory dumps. And we've all seen this, and we've seen this within pen test reports. We've got deceptions, as you've just seen, that are so effective, it's stopping these things. Same thing with port scanners. We can pick this up. We see things like DC sync activity, and actually Illusive has ways to be able to stop these. So this active defense posture, not only is it stopping or thwarting these techniques, but it's actually decreasing that dwell time down to a position where you can do that instant response that Andrew was talking about in the beginning. You've got enough time to be able to deal with this, well, slowing the attacker down and effectively stopping them. So that's everything that I wanted to show you. I'm going to hand back over to Matt now so we can actually explain how we can start going through this, how we can start to adapt this active defense posture.
Thanks, Tim, and thank you so much, Robert and Andrew, for the insights and for sharing your perspectives on why big game ransomware is such a significant issue in the enterprise today. I think we probably all recognise that it's no longer a technology-driven issue. This is very much a business and boardroom risk that needs to be understood. And from a Templar and Illusive perspective, we've got some thoughts on how we can help you, our clients and prospects, get started. I would encourage everybody who's on the webinar with us today to raise any questions that you've got in the Q&A window or the chat, and we can take those as I finish summarising the discussion. And we've got some time to answer those, and we can obviously take questions offline as well to follow. One thing I would state is that really the first step, I think, strongly aligns to how Andrew started the conversation. This is really about getting the right level of focus at the board level and ensuring that the journey starts with that mandate to address this as a very near and present risk for the organisation, given the impact it has operationally, financially, and from a reputational perspective. So Illusive and Templar are working very closely together, and we are delighted to extend the offer to all of our clients and prospects to contact us, and we'd be delighted to facilitate a session with you, an hour's business or board level briefing to really start the dialogue and help begin to start planning out how you tackle these kinds of problems in a production context. It's critical really that once you've kind of gone through that journey that you really understand what your weakest links are and where are you most exposed from a ransomware perspective. So really taking an assessment-based approach to this, understand the environment, and align this to your business risk register in terms of where you're going to prioritize your investment, both in terms of resource and technology spend. And then as Tim has shown you going through the journey, and as Bob has highlighted from some of the experiences we've had, taking an active defense posture is absolutely critical. So as you've seen, it's increasingly common that all of the existing perimeter controls that are in place in most enterprises and are still critical are augmented and extended with this new and very dynamic capability that we bring to market from an active defense perspective. And then finally, this is really all about defeating the attackers. So this is an ever evolving business challenge. We've seen obviously from some of the market imperatives that Andrew's highlighted that this isn't going away anytime soon. This is a very lucrative business. So we're keen to work with all of our clients and prospects to help you put an active defense in and really tackle this problem head on in the future. So in terms of some questions, I'm just looking into our chat window here. I can see a couple of things that's probably worth me raising. I think one, Andrew, for you really, is one of the questions we've received is how can boards and business really kind of respond effectively based on your experience of having helped them and supported them over many engagements?
Well, thank you very much indeed, Matt and Timothy. Fantastic presentation. I mean, that really does bring it home graphically, and that's probably one of the best illustrative presentations about this. You know, I've seen so many when it's been tried at board level and they've been asleep after 10 minutes or got their phones out or anything else like that. That was incredibly compelling. And to go back to your question, Matt, it's a really interesting point. Cybersecurity, we always say, is really a leadership issue, and it's a business leadership issue. So people do need to understand the threats and understand them in a demystified way. So they can actually put pound, shillings and pence on it. They can actually understand how it's going to damage their business if they don't take the right appropriate action. It's also getting the right governance in place within an organization where people who do look after critical assets know to ask for the right forms of defense. And it's about also championing the ICT agenda at board level to ensure that when somebody does come to give a brief, that it's a very compelling argument that people do understand. And I gave to you guys before about the example of British Airways, where, you know, for the sake of £50 for a bit of software, you could have avoided a £20 million fine from the regulator. On one side of the coin, of course, is we want to be really good at business and employ this active defense. But on the other side, of course, we've got regulations to meet. And this really helps you meet those regulations. It takes away those sleepless nights and it slows things down. So, you know, if you do have a number of hours to wait, and as Timothy has just so beautifully demonstrated, it does give a chance for the sysadmins to get in there and notice that something's happening and do something about it. Well, that's worth its weight in gold for execs, because every executive, every chief operating officer, every senior information risk owner, and I know because we have a huge coterie of these people we talk to on a regular basis, really do have sleepless nights over the risks they face. And, you know, it is the Wild West out there. Every time you go onto the internet or you use the internet, we're also interconnected around the world. That to launch an attack from anywhere is just so easy. That to get that level of assurance, and that's what boards really need, is assurance. So throughout the system, have that leadership and governance in place, that training in place, but also the utilization of something like the active defense to actually ensure that people know that that has been a worthwhile investment. And whilst people will say, so what's my return on investment? For me, that's always the wrong question. It's about what's the risk of not investing in this? And by the way, company X didn't, and they're bust and they've gone and they no longer exist. So, you know, and you know, Illusive have plenty of examples where that's happened, as do we. So for us, it's about integrating the people, the processes, and the sort of active defense into the posture that a company wishes to take. Obviously, as I said to you before, nobody's got the squillion pounds to spend on this, but it's that targeted spending to get the most bang for your buck and taking a risk managed approach. But you can only do that if you understand the landscape you're trying to protect. So again, from the board's perspective, it's about getting the education in place as well, demystifying and actually getting them to embrace technologies like this, and for them to have a clear understanding of how it's going to give the business benefits.
Thanks, Andrew. That's fantastic. Much appreciated. And Tim, we've had a question. I think this is probably one for you in terms of what ransomware families can we protect against using Illusive? And does this kind of give a complete answer to the problem?
Brilliant. And we get asked this very often, certainly as we're doing these kind of ransomware briefings, or we're talking to people about our offering. So there are a number of families we do protect against, and I've run various strains against within my lab, and we can protect a number of things. But actually, the active defense mindset is a slightly different one from how many signatures have you got, how many IOCs, which ones can you stop, and very much into if a piece of ransomware or a threat actor wants to try and come after the data, or they want to try and move around the network, as we're seeing with this lateral movement, that's where Illusive can stop it. And it comes back to, if a piece of ransomware is going to try and encrypt files, that's when we're going to be able to stop it. If it's going to try and laterally move, and it's going to try and get to your crown jewels, as we refer to them, get to the places that we really care about, we can stop ransomware before it's managed to get into these systems, and B, if it is encrypting these files, we can stop it. So if anyone does want a further conversation about how it works from an architecture session or specific pieces of ransomware, I'd love to have these conversations with everybody offline and bring this up.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tim. And a question has come up in terms of what really is the level of maturity that an organization needs to be at to tackle this problem, both from a board perspective and a technology perspective, and is there really a right answer to that? I don't know, Bob, whether perhaps you could offer some insight on that based on your experiences.
Sure, and I'm sure Andrew will have a position on this as well. I think what we're seeing across most sectors and subsectors is big enterprise clients taking the stance of assumed breach. The attackers are already in the network, perhaps they're laying low, so there's a strong desire to flush them out, do early detection, and prevent lateral movement, which in the end are the hallmark of any advanced attack. But I'd say this as well, that even down into the SMB space, where you have legal firms that are looking to protect IP or client confidential information. We're working with resources and mining companies where they're selling 30, 40, 50% of the valuable things that they're bringing out of the ground into the Chinese market, and they have the double whammy of being concerned about nation state, malicious, insider, and ransomware all wrapped up in one. So we're seeing it across every sector and subsector. And from a maturity standpoint, most clients have tried to move to adopting things like EDR technology, but as we've seen, the Russians have these controls in their labs. They know how to turn them on, they know how to turn them off. So this added level of defense is quite critical. Finally, Matt, we're seeing the conversations change as well. We just wrapped up the Security Europe Summit, and usually it's one of those things where you've got a booth and you attend presentations. But in this case, we had 14 sessions that were 40-minute one-on-one sessions with CISOs or heads of cybersecurity, and this is what's on their mind. And they are having to answer to audit subcommittees that have come in and done cyber posture checks to say, why can't we get ahead of this? So yeah, it's coming, and it's something Illusive can help with for sure.
Fantastic. And perhaps Andrew, maybe just your in closing comments, your perspective on the same question.
I think it's a very interesting question, and it really depends if you're public or private sector, to be honest. If you're public sector, you're there and you The whole point of the public sector is to maintain the confidence of the public, and that you can look after their private data, that you can utilize it for their own benefit and not lose it. And consequently, there's a thing about maintaining confidence and about investing enough across the piece that you actually can maintain that confidence going forward. Private sector, different drivers, obviously, share price, all the rest of it, but it's about getting that competitive advantage. So there are many maturity models out there, and we utilize quite a few with our clients, but actually the ones they're interested in. So how much do I get to the point where I can absolutely have that assurance that my business critical information assets are safe, and to the point where I can start exploiting them to make more money? Because that's where I want to be, and I want to be better than my competitor. I want to have that peace of mind that I know I've got the right insurances in place, but I can utilize my information to make money and keep that competitive advantage. So the levels of maturity are arguably the same, but they're driven by completely different drivers. And I said there are a lot of maturity models out there, and I would say that Templar up to this point has never had a partnership like this one, because we have been very wary of technology that we felt that we couldn't trust. So we're absolutely delighted to have this partnership with Illusive, because we back this technology 100%.
Thank you, Andrew. That's much appreciated. So I'm conscious we're nearing the end of our time with the audience today. So Tim, if you wouldn't mind just jumping forward, I wanted to let everybody who's on with us know that this webinar is being recorded, and we'll obviously send the recording to all participants within the next 12 to 24 hours. So you can replay any of this content at your leisure, but also really keen for you, the audience, to reach out to us. So we're conscious we've covered a lot of material today. There's some very significant areas that we could dive deeper into with you. So feel free to reach out to us either directly at Illusive or Templar Executives using the website addresses. Do feel free to call if it's your preference, but we're very keen to engage in a first discussion. And as we've stated, Illusive and Templar are partnering to run these sessions. The first hour, spend time with either the board or senior executive team, or indeed the cybersecurity organisations to really explore these issues in more depth. So I would say thank you to everybody for joining us today. We've been delighted to have you with us, and thank you very much, Andrew, for your time. It's been great to get the industry perspective, and we're looking forward to continuing a series of these sessions with you as we kind of dive more deeply into some of these issues. So thank you very much to everybody for joining today. Thank you, Bob, for your perspectives, and thank you, Tim, for running the demonstration. And we look forward to seeing you all on the next webinar. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks,
Andrew. Thank you very much, Matt. Thanks, everybody.